Brandon White. Welcome to the ROI Online Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I can't believe I'm talking to the guy who is the author of The Golden Toilet.
Say that three times without having a big smile. I'm I I'm just really I was excited about this conversation, but here's where I want to start. The other day I got this email from someone at AOL.com and I just giggled. But then there's a backstory to what's going on with AOL and why that's still so smart. And when I was talking to you, I got more of the inside story.
Yeah. I don't know if it ages me or not, but I did. I worked at AOL in the what is considered now the early days, which was really the second generation. I worked in marketing analysis, which was, I think an argument could be made probably one of the, if not the first big data division marketing analysis places of any giant internet company. I think we were worth 200 billion at the time, but um, it was an incredible time. But the AOL thing, yes. So a friend of mine, Isaac Turk, and I predicted that AOL would, even when dial-up disappeared, would have 2 or 3 million subs. And, people always joked about that, like, oh, well, 2 or 3 million subs, and 2 or 3 million back then was a lot. I think when I was there, we had 32 or 33 million subscribers, which isn't even a lot in today's day and age when you consider how many people are doing Google searches and things like that daily. But obviously back in the early 2000s, there weren't as many people on the internet. But the crazy part about that whole model was that we were at the time, and I mentioned this to you, there was a string on Quora where some guy was going off on AOL and how much it sucked and this, that, and the other. And I was like, I find this incredibly interesting because while your opinion may be true, let me give you some insight, which I'm not blowing up anything because this was I worked there 18 years ago or 15 years ago. It feels like forever ago. But just a minute ago, is our cost basis on a dial-up subscriber was like $7.82 or something. I forget what I put there in Quora. I used to have it in my mind quicker, but so you were paying $21.95 and our cost basis was $7.52. Last I checked, that probably could be considered a money printing machine. And that didn't include the premium services that we sold on top of it for about $3.95, like products like antivirus and call waiting. Sounds weird, but when you have dial up, we actually had to use call waiting, which you'll remember, right, Steve?
Uh-huh.
And our margins on there were 30% or more. So and we had generally back then not really high churn rates in general because we were one of the main providers until the net zeros and type people like that came. But AOL in many ways, Steve, was very misunderstood. And in my opinion, having worked there and been lucky enough to really understand numbers and model millions of hundreds of millions of impressions that you're making and figuring out what ads work and what don't. But AOL also, Steve, owned an incredible amount of other properties that people didn't know, right? We owned Netscape. We built a low cost ISP to compete with Net Zero at a lower price point without compromising our brand. We owned there were the quarterly, I always have trouble saying that, quarterly keyboard. Remember when we had to type and do that? We owned the patent. It was like 7 people who worked in Seattle that was basically printing cash. And when the Time Warner, I'm going off, I feel like I'm protecting AOL, but it's just so misunderstood. And it's so funny to me because I actually got to see the numbers and people would say, well, the AOL Time Warner thing was a bust. Well, that depends. If you were an AOL shareholder, you might say, well, that was true because AOL was throwing off like $2 billion a year in free cash flow, and Time Warner's best business, I could be exaggerating, and I'm going a little bit on memory, but I think their best business was potentially CNN throwing off $50 million of free cash flow a year. So if you do the math, and Time Warner had $19 billion, if my memory serves me right, in debt, I think AOL was paying off the debt for the Time Warner shareholders. So I'm completely biased because I was an AOL guy and had AOL stock and all of that. But there's people who still have AOL to this day, and my dad still has an AOL address.
Well, it's crazy to think 3 million accounts.
I think, like, I have not checked the I think AT&T owns them now, but I've not checked what they are. I would bet you if I look, they at least have 1.5 million subs. That would be my bet.
Times $17 a sub.
Yeah, I mean, they're still printing money.
That's think what AT&T had to pay for that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't pay attention as much. Like after I left AOL, I would pay attention more because it's like your family. I mean, we were really a family there. And at the time, we, for an internet company, we weren't as big as the Googles and the Facebooks of today. We had 5,000 professionals that worked, I believe, or thereabouts, maybe 4,000 professionals that worked on the Dulles, Virginia campus. And, that campus is long gone. I think Raytheon is in it now. Actually, I went to a Raytheon meeting in CC5 that I used to work in, which was sort of a crazy, like, sort of made you feel old. I'm not that old, but it makes you feel old when that happens. So it was a great time. But yeah, I mean, even a little business that has 1 million subs that is highly profitable, like, what's wrong with that?
Really? I mean, that's what everyone's striving for. And here we giggle about AOL, but we would die to have that business going.
I own that business all day long. And I think also people in cities, especially the coasts, and unless you've driven across the United States, I mean, you live in Texas, Steve, right? So there's a lot of area, if my memory serves me right, when I came across Texas that's open, is that there's these flyover middle states that exist that actually people in America live in who don't have fiber at the curb, who don't have cell coverage everywhere because it's all driven by economics. If the company can't make money, they're not going to put up a tower or drop fiber. So dial-up is potentially the only option still.
Wow.
I have. So, you can, if you want to build a business, in many ways, looking at the middle states is a great place to look.
Totally. So you say you're a psychologist and an analyst?
Well, I don't know what to call me. It depends. And you probably talked to my wife this morning and asked her, but from our debate last night. But I'm really just an entrepreneur. I do have a master's in psychology. I do have an MBA. I did some work at postgraduate work at Stanford, and I'm a certified Tiny Habits coach from BJ Fogg, who is an incredible guy to learn from at Stanford's Persuasive Computing Lab. But I think Steve, admittedly, I call myself what I need to be at the moment to be in the conversation.
Well, you explained it the other day, and I thought that was really cool how you said it. You take this data, but you apply it to where it connects with the human application in some way that you can exploit it. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and I'd say leverage it. I'm a guy who spent 3 hours last night reading psychology journals that are backed up by science, by numbers. I don't call it science, but by numbers. And I think at the core, I'm a guy who says, if you're going to run a business, you've got to do your financials. Like, first, I mean, besides the fact that, as you know, I advocate, if you don't have a business plan, you're just wasting in the wind. And that's really been the core of my message. But at at the core of that is you have got to run your numbers, and especially like ROI online. That's exactly what you've got to do. You've got to understand if you're going to throw, and you and I have talked about this. We talked about this a little bit with agencies out there that have sort of ruined the market, which I'm happy to talk about. But putting your money into marketing and sales, or just into the business, there is math behind it. Now, you talk to my brother, he'll tell you, like, he always say, stop running all your stupid spreadsheets. Like, it's just theory. It, at some level, may be just theory, but it does tell you what's possible. And if that's a negative number at the bottom, then I'm going to really investigate what's going on there, the numbers, the psychology, how people react, and things like that.
I think it really connected with me when someone said, look, when I look at numbers, I glaze a little bit. I'm in the creative side, but someone said, look, these numbers are here to help you communicate a very clear story. And that's when it made more sense to me, instead of like, okay, look at that number, then what was it last time? And do I do a percentage, or do I subtract, or do we do that? But when I saw, use this to build something that tells a very persuasive story.
And measure, in my opinion, what story you're telling resonates, and not just have an opinion about it. Because the numbers they're not always easy to aggregate or congregate and get through, but they do tell a story.
So Brandon C. White, he calls himself a bison who knows his business plans. What's a bison?
Well, I like to write these little parables, right? I found that if I tell you all the stats and figures, they're interesting, but if there's not a story behind it, and I know you're a big story and your agency is all behind that. So I'm preaching to the choir here, but you got to tell messages and stories. And there was a story that I read along, and I save all these stories. I've got all these things saved in my bookshelves. But there's a story about the difference between a bison and a cow in the Colorado Plains. And the Colorado Plains, as you know, are divided by the Rocky Mountains almost equally thereabouts, but it's one of the only places on earth where bison and cows roam together. And the storms generally come west to east. And what happens is when the storm starts to come over the range, the cow starts running east. And what happens is they believe they're running away from it, but cows are really slow. And in general, most people are really slow as it relates to natural disasters, wind. Like here today in Half Moon Bay, we have 40-mile-an-hour winds. Like, doesn't matter how fast I can run, or even how fast I could ride my bike, I'm not going to outpace this windstorm that we have. So a cow will start running east, and the problem is that cow finds him or herself in that storm for an extraordinarily long time, because they're prolonging their period in it. And interesting enough, for the animal kingdom, the bison actually starts running right into it as fast as they can. And that limits their exposure to that painful experience where the cow is just having to do it. So, or the cow is just enduring it for a terrible amount of time, being worn down, tired, and still in it, where the bison arguably has less exposure. So I always say, hey, look, you got to run at this thing, run at things that you're avoiding. And look, I'm not perfect, Steve. I don't procrastination and avoidance are human nature. Mm-hmm. But I always remind myself of that story. And I use that story when I talk to other people. My wife had a customer this morning who was just being a pain in the ass, quite frankly. You can beep that out. But and she's like, I'm going to be the bison this morning. She's like, I'm just going to run right at it. And the truth is when you do that, it's not that it's not painful, but it was actually less painful than she thought. And she didn't spend the day with a story in her head,
Mm.
which is what happens. She did this. I'm using my wife as an example, because she actually really put into practice what I preach in that sense, and it's a testament because my wife is a very independent lady, sort of like the you had mentioned our dogs. So I say I live with 3 Jack Russells, but my wife is she is incredibly successful and independent, and if she adopts something, it means that she really believes it. So she did the same thing the other day, and what it avoided was that we talked about something and we were making up all these crazy stories why the person was doing it. And the problem is that snowballs, and then you're into this story that the person didn't even, it's not even the person's story. You made up the story and now you believe it. And now you react accordingly, which creates this sometimes bad dynamic between you and that person. So, I say be the bison, and how it applies to business plans is, in my experience, people avoid business plans.
Yeah.
And they avoid them for generally a few reasons. One is they don't believe they have the time. 2 is they're not sure what goes in it. And 3 is they don't know how to do the financials. And it will be painful. But if you have it, you have the map, and at least you have something. So therein lies the parable of the bison.
I love that. You're right. I got a scholarship from Goldman Sachs to go to this program for businesses that are preparing to scale. And it was, they send you off to Babson, not for the semester, but it was a semester long workshop with 2 1-week appearances at Babson. The essence of it was you left with a business plan, among other things, but it was hugely empowering to have a lot of clarity, and you knew where, if you stepped on the accelerator, what it was going to impact down the road a piece. But they had to like drag me through this thing for a semester to get it done. But I really grew from that.
Yeah, I think when you say that, it reminds me, I'm a big road biker, and you, in general, ride carbon bikes and you ride carbon components because there's not a lot of give in that carbon. And every pedal stroke that you make, all the power because you're effectively transferring your power to this bike to propel yourself forward, all of that power that you transfer goes to pushing you forward. It pushes you forward. Now, if you ride a steel bike, for instance, which there's all reasons you would want to ride a steel bike. It's more comfortable in general. It's, you can ride longer in general, but it can also be more painful because the time it takes you in a steel bike, every crank that you turn, you're losing a ton of power. And I'm exaggerating a little bit because there'd be some bikers out there who want to debate with me all this crap. But the fact of the matter is that steel bikes give and bend, and that's why they're more comfortable. So when you push that pedal, you lose energy that's twisting the frame and not pushing you forward. And that's effectively what happens here, right? Is you realize what you just said there is that when you do get the plan, you realize for every crank you take that now it's how much, and all that energy is actually going to push and propel your business forward versus losing a bunch of energy because you don't have this plan. And now you're going to waver. I'm not saying that you might not find your way, maybe you will, but in general, when I go and ride 75 miles, all those little pieces, all those little advantages add up over those 75 miles. If I can stay in my drops longer, if I can and avoid the wind, if every pedal stroke adds just a little bit of power, that's a lot less power that I have to do at mile 70 when I'm 5 miles from home and thinking to myself, I'm done.
Yeah. So you've had a couple of successful exits that I think has impacted your business that you have now, that you help people build out business plans or build a business. Tell us a little, give us some background on what impacted you from what you learned and why you do what you do now.
If I could offer your listeners any advice, it's that when you get that success, which everybody listening here can have, that is true. When you get the exit, it makes you realize that it's real. So what I did before I had my first exit is and it's hard, and you know this, right? Is every day I'd be like, I'm gonna do the very best I can today, good, bad, or equal today. And I believe inherently that something good will come as long as I'm making progress. And it's this belief that you have to, what I tell my quote, right? Like getting a quote super hard in your life, but the one that I think I came up with is an entrepreneur has to believe they can do which they're not sure they can do. And if you don't inherently understand that thing, then you're not, I don't want to know if you're not ready, but it's going to be tough for you. It's sort of like being married. And I think if you've been together with someone 20 plus years, you're probably get to be considered an expert. So it's sort of like telling your wife that you can't stand her, but you absolutely love her all at the same time, right? Because of some crazy thing that argument you got into or something. So unless you can understand that, you don't understand in many ways what really true love. I don't want to say you don't have true love. I'll just say that it's endurance to get you through. And as an entrepreneur, you just have to, in those ultimate moments of doubt, believe that success could come tomorrow. And what that exit does for you is it says you were right. In the meantime, if you don't have that exit, I think surrounding yourself with stories from people that have always kept that inspiration, that belief, that knowing that there was somebody who had nothing and built it into something. And I think that keeps you inspired. But for me, I think what it did was it just, I mean, it made that belief, Steve, for me so much stronger. Like even today in the businesses that I have, I'm just like, something good will come. And, people who work for me are like, oh, Brandon, this is not looking good. Keep moving forward today. Something good will come.
I love that. I love that. I think the light bulb went off for me. I read this book called Built to Sell, SELL. And I'm not coming up with his name, the author of it. But what I realized was that I should be designing a business that can thrive without me needing to be driving, pushing, pedaling. And when you start to look at your business a particular way, then you start to build out the systems that can accomplish that, because you need to be thinking an exit. What I want something to show for all this work later down the line. And that started to make a lot of sense to me. And I think that helped me go from, I don't know, it just helped me start to see better the things I needed to be doing today, even when I doubt, even when you like going, I don't know if we're going to make it till tomorrow.
I think you hit on a key point. And that key point is, to me, that entrepreneurs have a lot of great ideas. They have incredible passion, energy, drive, belief, but you need to write down what you do in a system. And I'm picking out that point that you made, because there will be no way. It will be hard. I'm going to say no way. It will be hard to scale your business without writing down your system. And you have got to make, I'm going to point out an example. In my opinion, you need to make the first 15 or 20 sales yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And entrepreneurs will want to hire a VP of sales. And I made this mistake, and I paid a lot of money, not only in time in my own personal entrepreneur experience with businesses, but also in formal education, to know to not make this mistake. But I made it because humans want to romanticize things. And you shouldn't hire a VP of sales, I'm using that as an example, until you have documented the process, because in that case, they are extremely good at scaling when they know your process, but they are not the discovery people. And you will waste your money. But having said that, it doesn't mean that you don't hire someone who is in your blind spot or your weakness, who can take your brilliance in sales and write it down, because that may be the person that you need to hire. But you do have to have these systems, because if you don't have the systems, then everybody's making it up and doing the best they can, but that doesn't lead, in my experience, to a good place.
Your experience, you've worked with investors and you've worked with people, but where does marketing, mastering and really getting your act together on the marketing side of all of this, where do you see is like people finally get it handled or start to address it or understand the value of it? And then what's the exponential impact that having your act together there offers you in that exit?
So I'm going to interpret it. You can tell me if it's where you'd like me to go. Is having your act together is understanding your customer acquisition cost, your ARPU, your contribution margins, and whatever, and your P&L, quite frankly, because all that falls through the P&L. So having your act together in marketing is understanding your customer acquisition cost, and ARPU, for those who don't, average revenue per user, and your margins, contribution margin, which is how much you make on that marketing without your G&A, general administrative costs, come into it. Because once you know that, you just pour, like, you're not guessing anymore. Now, there still may be a portion of your marketing that you can't measure because you're trying to build your brand and you're doing awareness, right? And it's sort of like, did I have an ROI from that or not? But once you understand that, you just pour money on it. So having your act together in that way is what it means to me. But to get there, there's a ton of other things in marketing. Like, people seem to forget that a lot of marketing is understanding what your brand is, what your message is, and what is the one thing that you do, not five, right? But one thing. And then how are you going to build an experience around that invokes emotion, not functions and features, but emotion, so that you can get new prospects hooked. And it's also, and then along with that, if you don't have that, then you can't write your copy. And writing copy, I'm unfolding this thing to me so that people don't think, oh, well, I have my numbers. Well, in order to get your numbers, you got to write your copy. In order to write your copy, you have to align your whole ads. Like, and people would call me, I'm not a perfectionist, but I want excellence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you said, hey, Brandon, who are you? Well, like, what is your thing? I compete against myself every day. I love to compete. So I'm trying to be the best at this. So what I mean is that, let's say Facebook ads. And if you're going to have your Facebook ad, you've got to design your headline. You've got to design your copy. You have to have that copy align with your landing page.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be wrong, right? And there's some funnel people out there who do know their numbers, who will say that anything over 60% is really, really good conversion. Well, in order to get 60+%, you got to have everything aligned. And I would argue that you really want to be aiming for more, which is hard, but that's when you know you have your marketing message right. So I think there's all these things that have to be in it. And then you have to see what your customer pipeline is and how long it's going to take for you to get to a sale. But it's having your act together in summary is really understanding your metrics. Because once you understand that, you do understand your business, you understand your marketing messages right, you understand who your target audience is, because if you weren't tapping them, then you wouldn't get the metrics. So I think all of these things build on it. My one friend said, he's like, one of the most important things in business is sales and marketing. Like the only reason we have a business is because we have customers. The only reason we have customers is because we've reached out to the customer and delivered them solving a problem for them that they'll pay us money for.
You know, I find the stat that blew me away was 98% of the businesses in the US, when we say business, we envision these big companies with thousands of employees, but 98% of the businesses out there have 20 or less employees. And so that means that the poor person running that company is wearing all the hats. And my experience is like they get a good service, they get a good product, good employees, good customers, and then they go, all right, now I need to get my marketing and sales down so I can prepare to scale. But it's like very elusive, and there's all these things. But I loved how you tied in the numbers to the marketing, and I get asked that question a lot because the name of my agency is ROI Online. Okay, but they go, Steve, how are we going to know that this pays off? And the way I look at it is, what's the lifetime value of a new customer to you? And how many are you getting, and what's the cost of acquisition to that? This is what's going to help you speed that up. So I just look at how many new customers do we need to figure out that's coming on board to help justify really attacking this scary nebulous area that most of them they're just frustrated with this part of the business.
And I think, yeah, I think it comes back to the numbers is, frustration happens when your expectation is mismatched with what you're experiencing. But what you're experiencing may be a story that you just didn't edit yet, for lack of a better way to put it, right? Like, and you've got to get those numbers and understand them. And more often than not, at least that I've found, that when we walk people through that, or I walk people through that, they're like, oh my God, I never knew that. And I'm like, oh my God, thank God you found out today, because you just would have wasted another tens of, people, this, people come to you, people waste tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars because they, I don't know how many people come to you, Steve, but they always tell me, I got it in my head, Brandon. All right. Well, if you got it in your head, can you write it down for me real quick and put it in the spreadsheet and then send it back to me?
What kind of tool do you use to help them build out this business plan that helps them get clarity on what's going on in their business?
Well, I through a lot of failure, and having been a venture capitalist, having seen a lot of pitches and doing some angel investing, I came up with 13 slides to build your business plan and a formula to do that frankly, I just used myself. And I did it so that I could vet ideas and vet businesses really quickly. And I came up with these 13, everyone, as an aside, people are like, oh, well, 13 is unlucky. I actually wrote a whole article, like 13 colonies, 13 stars. There's like 13 arrows on the dollar bill. It's actually quite lucky if at least you and I are here in America, which in my opinion is the greatest country in the world. So 13 is pretty lucky. But what I did to come up with that was a lot of trial and error and also looking at the experts. So I took Sequoia Capital, who is arguably the preeminent venture capital firm in the world. There are a few others that are up there right with them, but let's just agree they're in the top. And they have a formula that they say when you pitch them. And then there's Andreessen, and then there's some famous entrepreneurs out there like Peter Thiel, who's the founder of PayPal, first investor in Facebook, go down the line, who have all taught these. And then my professors at UNC Chapel Hill who say, hey, if you're going to build a business plan, here it is. I took all of those. And in my geeky analysis way, I laid them all out, Steve. And then I said, okay, how does this work based on my experience and in the experience, meaning out of the, God knows how many times I've pitched or heard pitches, which ones worked and flowed. And I built 13 slides, and it looks super simple. It unfortunately took me 15 years to build. But it works. And I know it works because people who I've taught who listen and follow the 13 slides. I have one student, Steve, she's making dog beds, credible lady, had never raised money before, ever, had never even written a business plan, followed the 13 steps. We went to a 3-day conference where they had investors, and on her first pitch, she got an investor. I'm not, just for the FTC out there, claiming that is always possible. All I'm saying is it's happened more often than not, and it's happened with me. And just like I think you've come up with, Steve, for your agency, is a story framework. I've come up with a story framework for a business plan that people don't. It's a new way of looking at a business plan, and that new way leads a person down a journey that I don't want to say it's impossible to get to know, but it makes sense. And here's the deal. If you have a business and you get to the number 13 slide and it doesn't make sense, then you got to go back and edit your business. Right? I mean, if you get to the sales and marketing slide and you can't put anything down for sales and marketing, probably means you probably should call you up, hire ROI online to go get their sales and marketing done, right?
So this framework that you've designed of the 13 slides, I watch Shark Tank and I just cringe. I think of myself in that position. How would I answer that? Where would I get that information? Those guys are coming at you pretty hard, but does it give you the data where you could clearly communicate better at an advantage in a situation like that? Obviously, if in the example you gave, it's a yes, but in the Shark Tank?
Yeah, it actually, so I used to teach for Damon John and Robert Helzercheck of Shark Tank. And that's why they, at the time, came up with their programs, was that they see all these pitches and it doesn't always work as you see on Shark Tank. So, this system gives, you're prepared. I mean, to your point, it's like, you know the story, and it's not that someone might not, it's not that you might not be able to answer all the questions with a definitive answer, but you know what the questions are. And if you know what the question is and you know what it means, and you say you don't know because, then the investor or that person, whoever that you're pitching, whether that's for a big sales account or whatever, will respect you and understand that, versus getting caught off guard. Because getting caught off guard, as we see on Shark Tank, you have the best product in the world, but if you don't know what that question means, and then you're talking around it, what entrepreneurs don't realize is that at that time, it's not a test on, do you know the answer? It's a test on, do you understand how to run a business?
Mm.
And then you don't get that right. And the sharks basically are like, oh, if I make this investment in this person, I'm going to either have to teach this person or they're just not aware. So I think it's peeling the onion back. You know, at first glance, you're like, oh, they got caught off guard and they just didn't know the answer. Well, there's another question that they just answered at me putting my investor hat on saying, this is probably a red flag, right? As an investor, you're not looking for reasons to invest. If you believe it's a good business, you're looking for reasons not to.
Wow. Do you think I always struggle with, I want to start a business, so do a business plan and ask all these forecasting and things that I felt I was guessing. I didn't really know the answers, but I'm supposed to put some data down here. But I found it empowering being in the middle of a business. I was able to have more context around what my answers would be and why I would want to go to the future, even though I'm still not knowing. When's the best time to do a business plan?
Um, so the way that I see it is you got to do a business plan early in your process. And I would start with a one-page business plan as soon as I had the idea. And here's why. I wouldn't leave the house without Google Maps or Apple Maps. And um, I want, even when I go to, we call it over the hill. I go to San Mateo from Half Moon Bay, which is about 9 or 10 miles, not that far, but I use the map, Google Maps, because Google Maps tells me what the traffic is and they tell me a way around it, even though I believe I know how to get to Costco. And I think what happens is in that business plan, and I agree with you. In fact, my brother would totally agree with you. And why he calls me a total geek is stop building numbers. We don't know the numbers yet, but we do know the numbers that we need to get. And knowing what you need to answer helps you get there because otherwise you just don't know. And I don't know if that's like maybe I've been watching too much political stuff lately. That's a politically correct answer or politics answer. But the long and short is you should do a business plan as soon as you have it to vet the idea. And as part of that process in slide number 2 in this formula is the problem slide. And in the problem slide, it drives you to get out and say, hey, Steve, I've got this cool software product that I'll use one of my company, File Finder. File Finder, it helps you find files that you know you have that you can't find. Like, are you interested? And you would say, well, yeah, Brandon, I can't find files that are in my email from 6 months ago or remember where they are. Now what that business plan is starting to do is you're having to answer these questions. And are you solving a problem that people currently have? And it leads you through that process versus guessing. So there's a lot of debate about this. There's some guys in Silicon Valley like Steve Blank who are all about lean, right? Forget the business plan, but he actually does build a business plan, but he's saying, get out there and test your idea immediately and figure out if it's a problem. And I think going back to my Jeet Kune Do idea is I think you got to have the business plan because the business plan leads you to get in front of those customers by saying, what's the problem? And is the problem you're solving big enough that someone would pay you and test that? So I say you got to do it right out of the gate and it'll help you. Because otherwise, how many entrepreneurs have you met, Steve, that swear they have the best mousetrap known to man and they don't test it. They just believe, right? Because they want to believe. They don't write the business plan. They went out and got it patented and spent God knows how much, 30 grand. And they're nowhere. 5 years later, they got a patent that just doesn't matter because they don't have a business plan and you know what, in fact, it could appear to be the most unique way to build that, but no one cares.
So what's it look like working with you? Who's like the best fit for what you do? How do they?
So yeah, we segment people who come to me in really three buckets, which is you're just starting, so you got to get a business plan. That would be the startup entrepreneur. Our ideal customer is someone who has at least several $100,000 in sales, mainly because they've sort of gotten themselves through and they're beginning. I don't have to convince them. You have a book, so your book when your customers come to you, they believe. Usually, a customer who has a few $100,000 in sales believes that they have a good product, but recognize they need a business plan because they've either wasted too much money getting there or it's been painful. They want to scale. And then there's customers that do come to me and say, hey, I have a $3 million business and I want to take it to 7. That's a very, very different model with a different business plan than these other two. But in general, our ideal customer has several $100,000 in sales. But if you're just starting a business, then getting this framework and having us help you without making a huge investment is generally the types of people that come to us.
So is it one-on-one or is it like a course I'm taking?
Oh yeah, sorry. I appreciate you asking that.
Yeah.
It actually, it is an online course and then there's coaching involved that we offer. But what I really want people to do is I want them to take the course. It's very short, which helps you. So you're not spending 4 weeks taking the course. If you concentrate, you can take the course in a week. I've made it as simple as possible and at least attempt the business plan. Now, if you can't get the business plan, then I'm happy to offer some coaching along with that, which may be me or one of my coaches. Our program here is that I like to have coaches that have at least 10 years experience. Most of them have top MBA and have done it before and are doing this because they can make some money and they do enjoy helping people. And then the last option is we'll do it for you. But I am not open in general to just having someone come to approach us and say, do the business plan for me. Mainly because we're not going I'm going to have to go to them, or we're one of my ladies or gentlemen are going to have to go to them and they're going to get annoyed because they're going to say, why are you asking me all these questions? Because I don't even understand what's in the business plan. I thought you were just going to build it for me. Mm-hmm. Well, if I was going to do that and I thought it was a great idea, I'm not going to take your money. I'm just going to build the business myself and go make a bunch of money. So I really want people to understand the process. And we have a program that basically says, hey, if you've invested in the course and you do eventually want us to build it for you, that we'll apply that credit for you so that you didn't lose money. I really want people in this. Frankly, candidly, it's not my day job. I'm actually CEO of a software company here in Silicon Valley. I want success. I'm that guy. Like I don't want just success for me. I want people that I teach to be successful, so that I can brag about them. And I can talk about the lady, Nancy, who has Smart Adaptive Clothing, who followed the business plan and got to pitch to Home Shopping Network and is seeing success. Like that's my currency. And yes, we charge for it. And yes, it's a business. So we want to make money, but I want people to be successful in it. So I don't want to say that we're super picky and choosy, but if someone comes to us and it's just sort of, I'm not going to sell you the program if it's just going to be something that you shelf or don't care about and then come back and say, this was not good, or you're not going to really try to make work.
What's like the top confession that people tell you or that you hear after they go through this slide process?
I thought I had it all in my head, but I didn't even realize what I didn't know. And basically I didn't know what I didn't know. But I thought I knew it, if that makes any sense.
Totally. And where can they find this particular course?
They can just reach me. They can jump into my podcast at Build a Business Success Secrets, or just my website at brandoncwhite.com.
How do they get access to your Facebook group?
Oh, you remembered that. Uh, yeah, so we have a social media training group. It is a private Facebook group, and you can just Google Brandon, or Google social media training group Facebook, or go to brandoncwhite.com and we have it listed there.
So what's the one question that nobody ever asks you, but like you'd love to answer?
Wow. Gosh. The one question that no one ever asked me, but I love to answer. Wow, that is a good one, Steve. I got it. You might have stumped me. Um, um, oh, well, I don't want to say no one asked me, but someone did ask me recently. I actually talked about it, but when people ask me how, and I don't know if this can answer your question, but it's the best I can do right now without having prepped for it, Steve. So you have to flow with this one. But the when someone asks me how I'm doing, I'm always like, I'm never better. And someone actually asked me the other day, but no one ever asked me that. The question that I would say is, are you really never better? And no one ever asked me that, but somebody did ask me that on a phone call the other day, because I think they were, or a Zoom call, it was all zoomed out. And they said, this guy says, Steve, he says, in front of a bunch of people, by the way, he said, Brandon, are you really never better? Like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We've been stuck at home. Like, are you really never better? Is this just like your line? And I thought about it for a minute. I said, I don't know how, and by the way, Steve, I don't know how I came up with this, but I think I came up with it because it's true. I said, well, I live at the core. And all my people from my company started laughing. They were like, this guy is just open. He is about to get avalanched, that he doesn't even realize what's coming, because when Brandon says that, it's real. Like, he's not making it up. And I said, I'm going to leave this person's name out. I said, yeah, I'm actually never better. And here's why. And I think that it's a little overdone in our society, but it's true. And I don't know how to say it without being cliche in many ways, but you need to be grateful for what you have. And I found that happiness, for me at least, is wanting what I have. And I think most people don't want what they have. And I think if you can get there, then you'll find happiness. And the truth is, I do live at the core. Why? Because the sun came up. We've got another chance. I'm still alive. A lot of things can happen. Like, the body is a really complicated thing. I've had 3 knee operations, ACL reconstructions. I can still walk. I can still ride my bike. The doctors looked at my knee 8 months ago, and they were like, we don't even understand how you do what you do. Like, so, and there's a lot of people who aren't lucky enough to get out of bed and walk. And you can say, oh, Brandon, it sounds like a bunch of horseshit. But I honestly, I do think about that every morning, and live at the core. I'm not suggesting that it's always easy, right? Because it's always easy to look at, well, Steve's driving a Ferrari and I want the Ferrari. Well, but I do have a very nice car, and it starts and it gets me there in a good way. Like, let's just be grateful for that. And if you can live at the core. So I'm admitting that one person has asked me the question, but in general, the question is, hey, do you really live that way? And the answer is, I really do.
I love it. You brought some really good, what we call golden nuggets to this is great interview. You're a great guest, Brandon. It's Brandon C. White. He'll help you get your business plan all squared away. He's got a great podcast, um, Success Secrets.
Build a Business Success Secrets.
Build a Business Success Secrets. He's got a book coming out soon, but
With your help, with
my help. I love it. I just see it pays to do podcasting. Brandon, thanks so much for being an awesome guest on the ROI Online podcast.
Hey, Steve, thanks so much, man. Enjoy your week.
All right. And that's a wrap.